I'm more convinced than ever that there is a real extreme release of wickedness over the land. Have you noticed it? Have you noticed there is a release of wickedness? I'm old enough now to have a little history, and so when I look back, I can look at times when there's been seasons, there's been times where wickedness was a prevail at the time around the nations or around this nation. And there's such violence today and perversions and outright wickedness over the earth. How many of you hear that? It almost is of a biblical perspective or a biblical proportion that when you see things that are happening and the way people treat life and people and how they kill their children and how they just brutalize one another and how, I don't know if it's Antifa or who it is in between, but how they hate one another and fight with one another, want to hurt one another. And it's just seeming like a pot that's about ready to boil. Are you hearing me? And if you don't believe a certain way, you are ostracized or you're criticized or you can be attacked or you can be put off and shunned and all of that because you don't believe a certain way in society, culture today. It's just amazing. And I believe there's several ruling demonic spirits that have been released over our land. I believe there's several demonic spirits that have been released. And I'm going to show you, give you evidence that there's times in history where events have come where this same thing is going on now has happened in the past. Where it seemed like the floodgates of hell were open. And we're in one of those seasons. We're in one of those times where there is an absolute just filth of vile that's just dumped out onto the earth. Now, I'll tell you the reason it's there, and I'll tell you some things in a minute if you'll come with me. And but I want to take you there, so just keep listening because I'm just going to give you what I wrote down in the beginning of this so that we could really maybe focus in on something for a minute. How many of you hear that? And if we look back through history, we can see periods of time that simply, to put it blunt, all hell broke loose. There's been times in America's history that we could look back, and we could go back 250 years, 40 years, whatever. We could go back in history of this nation, and we could say, whoa, that was a period of time when it was horrible. Have you heard? And, of course, you can look at that, and you can see it through the realms of wars, whenever there's been wars. And there's been seasons in other nations that are the same way. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit about this so that you'll come along with me and understand it. But as we look back and the madness that has been operating recent, there's history for it. And we only have to look back, as I said, at the picture of wars. But let's take World War II just for a minute. And there's the American Revolution. There's the Civil War. There's Spanish-American War. There's just a lot of wars that have been on, but I want to use World War II. It's probably more fresh to most of us. You could use Korea. My wife's just finished a book. I think you finished a book on Korea, the Korean War. Her dad was in the Korean War, and one of the bloodiest, one of the most, sad what they did and the brutalization of what they did. It was brutal. And when you think of that, and you think of World War II, the war gave birth to just the most horrible, sick, and demonic activity that could be imagined on the earth. Are you hearing me? Yeah. And I'll just give you a couple of illustrations. I remember when I was in the Holocaust Museum in Israel. And we went in as a tour, we went in as a group, And I remember isolating or walking aside for a minute, and I got in the bus to go back to the hotel or go on in our tour, and I didn't speak for about 30 minutes. I didn't want anybody to talk to me. I was just absolutely stunned beyond measure. And if you've never seen anything like it, I'm not going to try to tell you the gore just to make my point, but I'll tell you enough to give you an understanding of how wicked that was and how devilish to take 6 million. Now look, I'm not going to just talk about what happened with the Jews. Millions of Russians were killed. I'll tell you how bad it was in the Ukraine. It was so bad in the Ukraine that over 1 million people through Stalin and those guys were starved to death, to the point in the Ukraine where they were breaking in to the concentration camps to try to get in there so they could survive, because there was food in there even though it was deplorable. That's how bad it was. And in World War II, of course, with the Nazi Germany and the Nazis and their experiments with body and people, and we were looking in the museum and how they took these people and ground them up and made fertilizer. And the SS guards, the SS captains and leaders in their own homes used that human fertilizer around their flower beds. I mean, again, I don't want to gore you out, but I just want to make a point here today. The demonic and the engagement of the occult that was going on, even with Hitler, who was very, very active in the occult. And the devil worship and all that went on. I mean, it was a period of time. And then in the South Pacific, you had the Emperor of Japan and Hiroshima, and he was the barbaric treatment that was done to people, to humans, and even to their own people, where they created a certain kind of pilot that was called a kamikaze pilot, where they would get in the plane and crash the plane into a ship to blow it up. And they got on the plane with that as their mission. So they were sending their young men that were 17, 16, and so years old, they were sending them out to war, not with the hope of coming home, but sending them out to die. And again, if you go into the prison war camps and read any books about them and all that went on and all that happened, it's almost hard to comprehend. And then on top of it, the European field, the starvations that were going on, and the nightly bombings in France and in England, and then just the constant for 6 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, whatever it was in full length, of just horror. My dad was in World War II, and he was in Africa, northern Africa, against Rommel, the guy that had the big tank infantry, and my dad was there in the 82nd Airborne, and he was a sergeant, and he was active, and his best friend that I got my name from was laying beside him sleeping, and a bomb hit and blew him up, and put this shrapnel stuff in the feet of my dad, blew his boots off, and he had to have them surgically removed, the little pieces of metal. And but just and you don't hear a lot of times people who go into these places, you don't hear them talk about it. How do you know that? A lot of these World War, when they landed on D-Day, on Normandy Beach. I mean, if you've ever seen how many of you ever saw Saving Private Ryan? A somewhat of a depiction of that. And oh my God, how they just stormed after storm out of these amphibious landing boats and were just mowed down and just, oh my gosh. But you see, what I want you to get, you get a outpouring of wickedness and this, and we can oftentimes lay it over on the subject of it was the war. But there was a spirit behind it. Come on, how many here? You had men like Mussolini. My dad saw him hung in Italy. And Mussolini and Stalin. And you had these guys, of course, Hitler. And you had these other leaders and the Japan Emperor. Many of those types of people. And you had all of these people that came. And how many of you know if the spirit of wickedness is on the earth, there's no doubt that spirit is going to catch and possess somebody that it can operate through. How many of you here? And we're living in the time right now where if you watch news or pick it up now, there's a 24-hour cycle of news, no doubt. So news is always on, and that makes a lot of this known that was already happening, but it's made known now because it's just prevalent. It's everywhere. But the key is that I've watched, and there's more hideousness, there's more sickness than I have ever seen. And we've always had serial killers. We've always had those kind of things, and all of that, and you know, all of the issues that try to get put out there. You know, it's a gun, it's a this or that, and then somebody does it with a knife, and then they run into people with a truck. So now you're going to ban trucks. I mean, you know, it's so stupid because we're going after the wrong thing. Some of you know behind everything there's a spirit. Behind creation is the Spirit of God. When you see a tree, when you see a fish, when you see an animal, behind that is the Spirit of God, because the Bible says the earth was broke. I don't want to go there, but God is always delighted in something broke. He likes brokenness, and he uses brokenness to give himself glory. And the earth was void and without form and without shape. It was broken. And God came in and fixed it. And you and I were broken, but he came in and fixed us. Can you follow that? And so in the process of this, we need to look at the fact that God wants us to see that there's a spirit world, and the spirit world is happening today and is activated today more so than it ever has been. And I want to say this. I've been in moves of God, and there's an activation of the spirit realm that causes supernatural things to happen. I've read, of course, and spoke to firsthand people that were in the Welsh revival and was in the 1906 revival and that kind of thing, and the Latter Rain revival. And so I have a firsthand experience and then a firsthand knowledge of people who are in a place where the Spirit of God moved. Can you follow that? And when that happens, it overrides, it invades. It's a supernatural thing. Come on. We had that happen here in 97. God just showed up. But right now, I want you to get this, there is a outpouring of a spirit, but it's not the Spirit of God. And we need to be able as Christians to discern. I might preach about your 5 senses coming up soon and how they apply in spiritual things. But one of them is smell, and that's discernment. And we need to understand that we need discernment today, and we need to discern the day we're living in, but we need to discern spirits. I'm here. And I'm a strong proponent of the fact that Christians operate out of the soulish realm, a dominant part of their life. They listen to the soulish realm, the suke, the carnal mind, the will, and the emotions. Suke, that's what it means. And it's the soul. They listen to the soul. I'm aware of that. But I got to tell you that we can't go there and ignore there's a spirit world operating at the same time. Now, how do you know there's a spirit that wants to keep you out of church, wants to keep you dumb, wants to keep you in sin, wants to make you a prisoner, wants to do this kind of stuff all the time? I'm here. And because that spirit is operating, it operates in the church more so than it does in the world. You say, whoa, wait a minute, how's that? Because those in the world are already under the influence of that spirit. It is the one that has walked away from that spirit that the dark spirit wants to occupy and regain and grab hold and pull back in to that cesspool of your old vomit. Over here. Come with me now. We're gonna talk today a little bit here. And we'll make this picture clear. Now, before I read the scripture, I got two major scriptures I'm going to get you to read. And before I do that, I want you to really follow this line. And we need to understand, right up front, we're speaking of a spirit. We're not speaking of human. But how do you know the spirit can't operate unless it has a body to operate? Because spirits are illegal. So the spirit has to have a body to operate in. How many of you hear that? And whether you yield to God or yield to the spirit of the enemy, the spirit of Antichrist, or the spirit of Satan, is going to be your choice. But there is a occupation and a impression that's always there of demonic force, or the fact that Jesus, his spirit, is there also to embrace. It's going on all the time. I mean, you know, there's activity going on in this room. Since I walked in the room this morning, I've sensed it. There's all kinds. And see, when many of you live just carnally, you don't even live near the spirit world of Jesus Christ. You live by the carnal world, which is the middle world. The spiritual world is a higher world. The lower world is the spirit of darkness. The middle role and the middle ruling place is the soulish realm. And how do you know that unless you leave the soulish and move into the spiritual, you'll only fulfill the lust of the flesh. You'll get the lust of the cravings of your life. You'll do simple things that you want to do rather than the will of God. Are you here? Now this spirit, I have preached about this spirit. I have said things about this spirit, but I discovered something that I never, ever saw. And I want to help us today. How many of you still with me? Yes. Now, when I'm dealing with this, you need to be aware that that spirit can be occupied people, but it can also be influencing people. I'm here. There's people in this church that are under the influence of what I'm talking about. Not possessed. Good people. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Now, the spirit, of course, is Jezebel, not male or female. It's a spirit. Hello? Stay with me. Ladies, I'm not calling you out. It's not about you. It is a spirit. But I believe if Malachi is true, Malachi 4 says in the last day, God would do something. He would turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, children to the fathers, and he would cause the spirit of Elijah to come on the earth. Hello? Well, when the spirit of Elijah was on the earth, there was a spirit that went against Elijah. In 1 Kings and 2 Kings. Are you hearing me? Some of you that have zero spiritual understanding, you will sit there in your carnal mind as though you're contemplating how to figure this out. Stop. You can't do this. You have to hear the word and see it according to this book, not according to the conjuring up of your own simpleton of a mind that you think can perceive the things of God. They're foolishness to those that are perishing.